program sounds interesting, it almost always turns out to be that there's something that you will learn and that you will take home and say, well, I'm glad I went to that. And today I hope that that will be true because Alan's programs are always stimulating. I think most of you know Alan Samry. He has done many things. He has written several books. He worked here at the library in the reference department for a while. He, I think, wrote a column for the Courier for a while, didn't you? He has written for other magazines as well, which he maybe will tell you about. Currently, however, he is the Library and Resource Center Director for Coastal Alabama Community College and has just been named the director of the Marietta Johnson Museum on the coastal campus. He does his history walking tours around Fairhope, which I think is pretty much of an accomplishment considering that he doesn't walk the way the rest of us do. Is there anything else I need to say about you, Alan? He really enjoys researching Fairhope history. One of his books is about Clay City tile houses and pottery and stuff. So, and then your leg book. What is it called? Stump the Librarian. Is one of his books. But anyway, today he has picked another eclectic topic, and so please help me welcome Alan Samry.
So, yes, the monopolists. I'm guessing that I won't ask you to raise your, I would ask you to raise your hand if you've never played Monopoly. Exactly. What? Really? All right. Skip Jones, non-Monopoly player. And I'll have the game for you maybe towards the end of the program. So my title is, I love a good long title. And so this is it. Fairhope's connection to America's most popular board game and how it was taken from Lizzie McGee, a first-wave feminist, single-tax and inventor, by one Charles Darrow, a down-on-his-luck, Depression-era opportunist turned thief. And that really sums up the book. That's also my book summary. So just some quick stats on Monopoly first. And these are older stats. These are from the book, which was published in 2015. So I read the book in 2018, so a few years after the book came out. But now the secret's kind of out about Lizzie McGee. So 300 million games have been sold worldwide. And Monopoly is available in 111 in countries and in 43 languages. The longest Monopoly game on record lasted for 70 straight days. Now, when they say 70 straight days, I'm like, well, did they sleep? Because, I don't think you could stay up for 70 days. Yeah. So, anyway, that's just a little brief intro. It was, Parker Brothers was the one that sold the game and supposedly, has the storyline for the game. But we're going to go way back in history and talk about Elizabeth Lizzie McGee. And so she was born in 1866, and she was a pretty revolutionary woman. In 1894, she developed a patent for a typewriter. So she had this, she was a stenographer and a typist, and earned a living for her. She made a living for herself, but she got frustrated with this type of mechanism that was on the typewriter at the time, and so she holds a patent for a typewriter modification that I have a copy of the patent. I just didn't put it in my slides, but it's a fascinating thing. She's pretty much a genius because she developed it. She figured out the engineering for this kind of thing, and then she wrote the patent. The language in the patent is really impressive. And during all that time, she was what we refer to today as a rabid single taxer. But not just a single taxer. She would have been considered a Georgist. So she just really was a really instrumental part in the Henry George single tax movement, was part of the several clubs, and really went around and talking to people about the idea of single tax and what that all meant. And so her father, oddly enough, he was a friend and supporter of Abraham Lincoln. And so he was not in his cabinet, but he was in his circle of friends in Illinois before he became president. And so it's just an interesting circle that they were connected to, because Lizzie was born in Illinois. And I'll have more about that later, too. Again, this is just a little intro to single tax or Fairhope connection. But then the connection really kicks into high gear, because you'll see this is dated October 20, 1898, from the Single Tax Propaganda Association. Single Tax Propaganda Association. Okay, and we know this is almost 4 years after the founding of Fairhope. And so, well, technically less than 4 years, but anyway, we have this really interesting letter from none other than Lizzie McGee, inquiring about what we're doing in Fairhope with the single tax idea. And so she's in Washington, D.C., working for this organization, and she inquires to this man named Altona Chapman, who is a fairly new guy also to Fairhope at the time, which I found interesting. I don't know how she found his name, because he's not really listed in the kind of the leadership of the single tax colony here in Fairhope in those early years, but his name is around. And so, anyway, this is just a letter. This is the letter that's signed by her. Oh, I did want to mention one thing about the letter first. So there's a quote here, and I'm going to try to read it. It is with such fearless, enterprising people as you can, as you. Oh, okay, good. Go ahead. Read it again.
It is with such fearless, enterprising people as you that we want to keep it close touch. With such as you lie our greatest hope.
Yeah, so she's really talking about Fairhope being this single tax colony, and she's like cheering them on at this point, like, you're doing great. And so she wants more information, which is kind of how she closes the letter. Well, that aside, the important thing is that we have a communication from Lizzie McGee in 1898, okay, 1898. And she is representative of this Single Tax Propaganda Association. And of course, they have some books that they could sell you. So you could buy Henry George's Progress and Poverty. I don't think it's the whole book, but it could be 25 cents for the book. Seems pretty reasonable to me. Having read it, that's got to be like, a pittance per ounce, because it's not a small book. And so anyway, this is just an early connection. And so this is 1898 that she writes the letter to Fairhope. And then in 1904, this is her patent for the landlord's game. Okay? So we have this patent that she filed in 1904, and it's available online. If you can just type in Lizzie McGee, the landlord's game patent, and up it comes. And I just have a picture of her board, but there's everything that she included in the patent. It's a very technical thing to do, and the attorney's obviously there with her as well, probably someone who knows patent filings. Even back then, it was complicated. But she also includes 2 sets of instructions for the game as well. And so, and I'll talk a little bit more about those instructions later. But just so you know, like, this is a real thing, but nobody knew about this for a really long time. So 1904, this is now, and I'm sorry the image blurred out, it's because it's a small file. But this is her 1906 updated board game, okay? And so this one does not have the patent. This one is just like, okay, I made some changes to the board, and I might have changed some of the rules, but it's ultimately it's the same. And again, you can't really see that one. It's a little bit too pixelated. But this is November 1, 1904. If you haven't played the Landlord's Game, right? That's an ad in the Courier for the Landlord's Game. This is the same year it was patented, by the way. And so we know that people were playing the game, a version of the game, right? Because if we think about how other games develop, right, there's the rules that somebody comes up with, and then it's kind of like when I play wiffle ball with my late brother-in-law. We play wiffle ball in the backyard, and I'd hit something to the roof, and it would be a foul. It would be a foul ball, and he'd say, if he hit it on the roof, he'd say, well, that's a triple now. So it's the same idea. The rules of the games evolve, as do the boards, which is kind of why we got into this real gray area to begin with. Anyway, so this is the Landlord's Game being advertised in the Fairhope Courier, our Fairhope Courier, 1904. I say our because I wrote for it for a while when it was right on Fairhope Ave, where the old post office was. Proud of that. Let's see. All right. Have You Seen the Cat is also an idea about Henry George and Georgism and single tax. It is another game, and it's kind of based on, it says it's a sequel to the Landlord's Game, but it's also her game. So again, I talked about the board being the same, but the rules changing, right? And so yes, it's very much so the single tax. And if you're a Georgist, there's a whole thing about have you seen the cat, but I can't go into that today. I have seen the cat. I think some of you, I'm pretty sure Allison has seen the cat. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears here a little bit in page 61. So Lizzie McGee is a single woman, and she finds it very trying, finding it difficult to support herself on the $10 a week that she was earning as a stenographer. Lizzie staged an audacious stunt that made national headlines. Purchasing an advertisement, she offered herself for sale as a young woman American slave to the highest bidder. The ad reads, intelligent, educated, refined, true, honest, just, poetical, philosophical, broad-minded and big-souled, and womanly above all things. Brunette, large gray-green eyes, full, passionate lips, splendid teeth, not beautiful, but very attractive. Features full of character and strength, yet truly feminine. Height 5 feet 3 inches, well-proportioned, graceful. And so she talks about the struggles of being single in a city, right? And so she does get responses. I will just read a quote for you before that. Money only has a relative value. Once $10 might have been opulence, I do not know. But $10 in a city like Chicago or New York can buy only the bare necessities of life. And so what happens is that she gets a lot of publicity for it. But she only gets a few offers, none of them very serious. One of them, the offer that she takes is with an older couple. She's also 40, by the way. She posts this ad when she's 40. So, but she's taken in by an older couple who live outside of Chicago, and she's allowed to just to still live within more comfortably, I guess we'd say, based on them taking her in for a few years. But that doesn't last long. She moves around. anyway, it's just fascinating to me how we would say in the day, it went viral. And so she posted it in one newspaper, and then like across the U.S., all these other newspapers picked it up and interviewed her and all this. It's a fascinating, another sideline in the book that's worth exploring. I'm just trying to give you a bigger arc. And so the bigger arc is, okay, back to the Fairhope Courier. So this one is from a man named J.W. Brom, who was the treasurer of Single Tax. And he's talking about the Fairhope Public Library here. And so I always, you know me, I have to get my public library angle in. It says, it appears that the records that only 10 cents was expended on the library. If I remember, now keep in mind, this was like, she was getting $10 a week as a stenographer, and the library's getting 10 cents. If I remember correctly, however, the rent of the librarian was canceled. So they let her live without paying her land rent. This is not an adequate remuneration for so important a service. The library plays a great part in attracting people here, as a free circulating library is rare in the South. There is not even one in Mobile. Mrs. Howland patiently allows the public to invade her house twice a week, wipe its feet on her carpet, muss up the magazines and books, and rob her of a great deal of time and labor. After it is gone, she cleans up the rooms, rearranges the files, and patiently awaits the next attack. She does this all for the good of society, and indeed, I believe her work to be more important than that of many Christians. And so, having worked at a library and having many of you be patrons of the library, y'all are mussing it up all the time, and we're always ready for the next attack. Why do I read this to you? Because Marie Howland and Mr. Brom, or Bram, I guess it's Brom, have more history later in 1907. So these are Mrs. Howland's letters. Some of you may not know, but she was an associate editor of the Courier, and so she had a weekly letter that she kind of summarized her correspondences with other people that she knew in the worlds of literature and art. And she was a very worldly person, and people knew her and knew that she had come to Fairhope to support single tax. This was the last stop for her colony life. And so I'm going to try to read it from the screen here. So, big news. She plays the landlord's game with Mr. Brom. And this is 1907. So let's see. I'll try to pick it up in the middle here. Okay. There was a crowd around them when the presentation speech was made by Mr. Gaston. And then, I must confess, I saw and heard more of a new single tax game than anything else. Some of us women tried first to learn it, but it struck me as rather complicated. I wanted to persist, but the rest were soon inveigled into the noisiest game I ever heard of. I think they call it pit. It should be called split from the effect it has on the ear. Other games there were, but this one, called the landlord's game, is not only fascinating but instructive, or as the publishers, the publishing companies say of it, the game is an eye-opener concerning land monopoly and the single tax. And then she says, Comrade Brom. Now, again, Comrade Brom is intentional, because there's socialists and communists here in Fairhope. So that's very intentional. Comrade Brom and I undertook to master the fundamental principles of the game. And you can see this is obviously, this is from microfilm, I think, and so there's a flaw in it, so I'm going to try to read my best. We read the rules, dealt the cards, furnished us with the proper amount of money, and with dice and boxes from the split tables, we commenced, supposing that Mr. Bram was wholly acquainted with the game, but by the way in which he managed to get hold of franchises, railroad mines, land titles, etc. I thought he must have taken in the landlord's game with his mother's milk. I'm sorry, that line just cracks me up. Fairhope Avenue he owned, and every time I stopped there in my progress in life, I had to pay rent to him. I kept getting deeper and deeper into the water until I landed in jail, if a little mixture of rhetorical figures may be excused. Because, again, if you don't know the game, she's telling you that there's jail in the game. Pretty unusual, I think, for a game, even back then. Anyway, they basically, she kind of sums it up saying, this thing's, really challenging, and consider her probably one of the smarter people in early Fairhope, and she's really thinking that the game is complicated, and so that kind of tells you a lot. I'm going to skip over this slide. This is not, kind of doesn't fall into my scheme. So this is what Lizzie McGee has to say in general about the single tax movement. It is a practical, oh, sorry, that's the next one. She's talking about how the game was played here. This is Mary Pylon. Lizzie's game featured play money and deeds and properties that could be bought and sold. Players borrowed money either from the bank or from each other, and they had to pay taxes. And this is the version. This is the colorized version of the board I think they played in 1907 that Marie Howland played, because it has Fairhope Ave on it on the top, kind of just to the right of center, right next to Gee Whiz Railroad. And so you get a sense of this, the layout here now, right? So, on the bottom right is, it's not go. It's collect your wages, right? Collect your wages. A very tribute to Mr. George and his belief in labor. And so it is called the landlord's game. And she even has the patent for it, but it's a different game company. So again, there's right, different, and this is early on. I know we know, or I say we know, Mary Pylon and a lot of people a lot smarter than me have been able to trace the game, so that they know that this game board is before probably 1910. So the board game that they likely played in Fairhope was probably not a full colored board. But keep in mind that these game companies, they were churning them out, and then people made their own boards to make it even more complicated. So some people might have taken one of Lizzie McGee's games or an earlier version of it and then created their own and kind of tailored it to their own game. Let's see. Okay, so you get the idea. There's railroads. There's Lord Blue Blood? I think that was one of them that I was kind of thought was interesting. Anyway, just interesting ideas. But the game wasn't set up. The game was set up not for capitalists. It was meant to kind of give you some information via a game on the ideas of Henry George and single tax. And it played really well. It was very popular in that era that it first came around. And so they talk a lot in the book about the village of Arden, Delaware. And this annoys the heck out of me. For a couple of reasons. One is, okay, so in the book, she talks about, and this is page 38, so it's before that quote about Lizzie McGee trying to sell herself. She says, Arden was both a residential town and a political destination. The community hosted conferences on women's suffrage, presidential candidates, and attracted many northeastern intellectuals looking for a fresh air retreat during the summer. Single-tax communities were also established in Fairhope, Alabama, and Andorra, a microstate of southwest Europe. All were fueled by dollars of Joseph Fels, which is all true, but she gives Arden a lot more writing than it deserves. And somewhere in here, she even says, well, she could never confirm that Lizzie McGee ever came to Arden in the first place, which, again, I'm like, okay, well, if she had gone to Arden, then I could see her making those connections. But as far as I know, there's no record of her visiting Arden, just like there's no record of Lizzie McGee visiting Fairhope. which is something that I really wanted to find, and no one's been able to find it, because I feel like she would have, maybe early on, maybe made the trip, but they got her game instead, so.
Isn't Arden the only remaining pure single-tax town?
It's really pretty much a land trust, kind of like Fairhope single tax is, but it's much smaller. And that's the thing that's different about it, is that it's, well, yeah, I don't know how their structure works, but it's a very small example. And so to use them as a model and not use Fairhope as a model seemed perplexing to me. Even for Lizzie McGee, because there's not really much of a mention in it. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So this is where it gets a bit tricky, because we're shifting back to the Monopoly game. So, and Arden, Delaware is not too far from Philadelphia, and that may be why they're making some of these connections. So this guy is a man named Scott Nearing, and he uses the game to teach at the Wharton School of Business, or I guess it's the Wharton School in Philadelphia. And so he starts calling the game, he starts calling the landlord's game the Monopoly game. Okay, so that's his contribution. And then, okay, so the game is still selling. Her version is selling, but people are still making their own. And obviously, it's kind of like, she's not making any money on it. So that's also like something that it grows frustrating with her. So what does she do? She patents another board. She says, all right, here's my newer board. This is a bit more fine-tuned. This was from we've sped ahead quite a bit. This is 1924 now, so in case you didn't see the date in the middle. And so, to me, this board is not quite as exciting. It doesn't have that, like, patent medicine look of the 1906 board. But you can still, and Fairhope Avenue has come off of it, but Fells Avenue has been added. Right, and we haven't been able to establish whether the Johnson Road is Marietta Johnson or it's just some random Johnson. So anyway, this is, again, the newer board. And so, again, this is sort of happening in Philly and in those areas. And then, but of all people, the Quakers start to play one or many versions of the landlord's game or Monopoly. Or there's a bunch of, one of them is called Finance now. So there's this sort of mashup of games kind of progressing along and people that are playing them. But there's a group of Quakers in Atlantic City, and there's a man named Jesse Rayford who came up with the idea of using small wooden boxes as houses and to link the properties in color-coded groups of 3. Streets were renamed to match Atlantic City neighborhoods. Okay, so there we have, like, this is still nothing to do with Clarence Darrow, by the way. Nothing. This is a man named Jesse Rayford. This is in the 20s. That Mr. Rayford is kind of developing these, but it's also being shared amongst the Quakers. So this is like they're making their own games, and in the book she's got some versions of the games that they made. Some people made them out of wood. They actually carved the board games out of wood. Really fascinating. That's how serious. I mean, it was a serious game then, just like it's a serious game now. So anyway, that's again one of these progressions that I'm trying to kind of share with you. And so, who's the guy? It's Charles Darrow. Charles Darrow. He is the inventor of Monopoly. That is his board game on the left, or a version of it on the left. And so we see some similarities, right? We see the emblem for the railroad and the colored things for the, but we already know that the Quakers and the other gentlemen have already developed all that. So we know, and it's in the book very clearly, that Mr. Darrow plays the game in Atlantic City. I couldn't find any. Yeah, I couldn't find any. He's from the Pennsylvania, but I don't know. Like up until till he shows up with his Monopoly game, I didn't do a whole lot of deep research on him. But yes, there's information in the book, some background about him. He was really struggling. So he produced this round board in 1933 and submitted the game to a bunch of companies, Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers, and they rejected the game. Both of them said, "No, this isn't going to fly." And then in 1935, that's when and I'm not sure what happens. I forget what happens. But they say, you've got a deal, right? So the Parker Brothers, and they strike a deal, and this is Parker Brothers or Darrow's patent for his version of the game. And so again, you can see some similarities, you can see a lot of differences, but they were all receiving patents, and so. But this was, it's in the book, I forget if it's detailed about, I don't think when Parker Brothers patented it, they would claim that they didn't know about the previous versions of the game. And it's a bit, but they did obtain this patent for it in 1935, and it was issued. And so who knew what and when, only the Parker Brothers Corporation knows. So, excellent question. So the Parker Brothers does discover in that the patent was issued in 1905 to Lizzie McGee. And this is George Parker, founder of Parker Brothers, but he is retired at this point. So he travels to Virginia to meet with Lizzie McGee and say, hey, he basically offers her $500 for her patent rights and then promises to produce the Landlord's Game, which is the game that you see here. Produce that and several of our other games. And he's saying, here's your $500 for the patent, and we'll give you we're going to develop a couple of games just for you. And so he does this, but he doesn't do this until 1939, which is, Monopoly has already taken off. And so I'm not speaking for her, but $500 was not a lot of money, even in 1939 for such a popular game.
At some point, has she currently gotten married?
She does get married. She gets married very late in life. I think after. Yes, right. So she gets married in the 30s, and that's when that's when Parker Brothers develops her game, and she's Lizzie McGee Phillips. But her games really just don't go anywhere. And so you can see here, I don't know if this is a version of her board game, if this is a different version of Monopoly that she's holding. The one on the right looks like similar to the one that she patented in the 20s. Anyway, so obviously they paid her off, and her games never gained the popularity that Monopoly did. This is in the book, too. This is a quote about Lizzie McGee, and again, I circle back to Henry George, because she was a Georgist and a single taxer all her life and never really gave up on it, but it sounds to me here that she does, and so this is from Pylon's book, from the book. What is the value of our philosophy if we do not do our utmost to apply it? To simply know a thing is not enough. To merely speak or write of it occasionally among ourselves is not enough. We must do something about it on a large scale if we are to make headway. These are critical times, and drastic action is needed. To make any worthwhile impression on the multitude, we must go in droves into the sacred precincts of the men we are after. We must not only tell them, but show them just how and why, where our claims can be proven in some actual situation. And so when I read this, what strikes me is that she doesn't acknowledge Fairhope, Alabama, because Fairhope, Alabama is doing the things that she's claiming not being done. But she either never really followed up on it afterwards, after that original letter, or she just didn't see the scale being enough for George. Now, there's the whole argument about whether single tax is Georgist or not, and that's something we can discuss. But she's writing about it as though it's never been practiced. And, E.B. Gaston, our founder, would basically say, we're making good theories work here. We've taken these principles and we've applied them as best we can, and we are doing it. Like, that's the masthead of the Courier back in those early years. And so anyway, this is just kind of her summation on her frustration with single tax and Henry George, but she didn't have the information that I have now. All right, so again, another gear. Like, this is another big change. So this guy's name is Ralph Anspach. Anybody heard of him? No. So in 1973, he's an economics professor, and he's a nerd, and he develops, as you can see, anti-monopoly. And so Parker Brothers will have none of it. And they chase him like a rabid dog, telling him that he cannot produce his game. It's a copyright and patent infringement and rah-rah-rah-rah, all these things. This game was actually to teach people how the free markets actually functioned. And he called his game Anti-Monopoly. And so his game, and again, this is detailed a lot in the book. It's kind of a legal thriller in that sense. I enjoyed reading kind of the back and forth between Anspach, and he defends his rights. He takes it all the way through, I think, at California Supreme Court, and loses, and then he takes it back again, and he's going broke. This is all in his dime as an economics professor. I think he's at Berkeley, of all places, being an economics professor at Berkeley. So anyway, he's trying to he's trying to defend his game and that people should be playing it. And so I don't know if this came out before or after, but the $1 billion monopoly swindle, right? This is Anspach's, his research is where, Mary Pylon is really gathering a lot of her information, is from Ralph Anspach, who does all of this work, incredible amount of research, basically to defend his version of how markets work and how capitalism is supposed to work. And it's not like monopoly, or less like monopoly. And so he produces this little book, and but the story about him, he actually has to go to the landfill, and he has to destroy they have to destroy 40,000 games. And so it just crushed him that he had to see that witnessed and have them bury his games in a landfill. But also motivated him, obviously. And so, yes, you can buy Anti-Monopoly today, but most people obviously have never heard of it. Yeah, so initially, he lost all those suits, and I'm not the legal expert, but somewhere along the line, he's overturned, and then Parker Brothers settles with him, because I think they just got sick of him, because this thing lasted the suits lasted 15 years, and so he wound up doubling his, they basically, once the judge ruled in favor of him, then he negotiated with Parker Brothers, and, obviously there's things that weren't disclosed, but basically Pylon says that he gained probably double of what he was originally offered by Parker Brothers. And so, he has the right to make his gain. And so, anyway, that's the anti-monopoly. And then, so now there's Fairhope-opoly. You might have seen it around. Yes, it's at Page and Palette. I was telling Suzanne, I said, I just could not plunk down $35 for this. And so, because there's so what's happened with Monopoly now is it's a little bit like how it started. So, I've mentioned before that, there was Lizzie McGee's game, and then there were like kind of riffs, if you will, off of her game. The rules changed, some of the things were different, but they didn't have the licensing. So what the difference is now is that it's not Parker Brothers anymore. I think it's Hasbro that owns Monopoly. And so Hasbro said, come with your bids, and we'll sell you our copyright stuff, and you can build your own boards. That's why you see all these variations of the board now in stores, and every town has an Opoly game. If you're anywhere, you got your Opoly game. And so this is just a bigger picture of the board. I'm not sure about we're all so passionate about, our game pieces, right? Like, yeah, so at the bottom is what you get. You get the high five, the big smile, the heart, the dog, I guess. That's one of the same. Pretzel and a gym shoe. And I don't know who established the license for this game, because it wasn't Sunset Rotary. It may have been our idea, but I don't think we pursued it. Somebody else, yes, right. Somebody else pursued the licensing for it, and then you're kind of at the mercy of the game makers. So anyway, all right, so anyway, this is, again, I think even some of the names have already changed because things aren't around anymore. And this is just, for you guys to continue on. I recommend Mary Pylon's book. It's very good. And I had, when I was rating books for Goodreads, I don't rate them anymore. I just mark them as read. But now I gave a review for it, and it was very informative and very well written. She does sometimes bounce from chronology, but it's for good reasons. But PBS, the American Experience, has a fairly new video. I think it's a couple years old now, called Ruthless, and it really kind of tells the story. And they interview Mary Pylon she's in the documentary and stuff. And so if you're interested in the video version of it, it's worth a look as well. I found it interesting, and it's much more compact, but really tells you, we know who the villains are. And so, yes, questions, or we could play if you got 2 hours.